Members, we will start today's presentation hearing from the state of North Carolina. The state has applied to hold a pre-window state-run primary. At this time, I'd like to welcome Chair Clayton and the North Carolina delegation to the podium to begin their presentation. As a reminder, you have 15 minutes and the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you all so much to the Rules and Bylaws Committee for all of the incredible work that each and every single one of you do for our communities, for our states, and for our country at the end of the day. My name is Anderson Clayton. I'm the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, here today to tell you all about why North Carolina, for the first time in our state's history, is applying to be part of the DNC's early state window. Because North Carolina is not just a 2 or 4 year strategy for our national party, it is a 20 to 40 year strategy looking at the future of where the Democratic Party's advancements need to go. And you cannot build a coalition in North Carolina without building one that is ready to win the White House, everybody.
Hey, everybody. Demographically, North Carolina is truly a microcosm of the country as a whole. We have a number of key voting groups who are listed here, which will be critical for our success in the general election. North Carolina consistently shows strong population growth among states. We are currently the 3rd fastest growing state in the country, and we are #1 for state-to-state migration between other states. We have a fast-growing AAPI and Latino population. They are our 2 fastest-growing ethnic groups. We also have a relatively large Native population that we have partnered with in the past, and we continue to center their voices in our work going forward. 21% of North Carolina's population is black. In the Democratic primary in 2024, 37% of Democratic voters are identified as black voters. So they are truly the core of the North Carolina Democratic Party, and we believe putting North Carolina first will center their voices in being the first judge of a presidential candidate in 2028.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you for having us.
What you're looking at in North Carolina, we have the 2nd highest rural population of any state in the country other than Texas, a state that chose not to apply for the early state window, but that we all know North Carolina's fastest growing rural population is equated to the fact that both of our economic diversity comes from agribusiness and manufacturing. Agribusiness is still the #1 economic driver in North Carolina, which is why we know that if you're able to win a state like this one, you are also able to carry those Democratic victories into states that we have not currently seen Democrats win in a long time. That also means North Carolina has the 5th highest veteran population in the country right now as well, when we think about the fact that we want to be able to serve a diverse community of not just an economic background, but also identity background as well. College students as well is a huge factor of what we're looking at for the youth vote this year, and also going into 2028 and 2032's presidential cycles, because we know that youth turnout is an area that we have to increase, especially when you're looking at voter turnout for presidential races. And so making sure that North Carolina, a state that has over 600,000 college students in the state itself, because we are one of the states that have a UNC system of higher learning. There are 16 public schools in North Carolina that are all under a university umbrella. We are one of very few states in the country that have a university system like this, and that also it was set in stone by previous Democratic governors in North Carolina who understood the future of our state was investing in public education and higher education at large. And what that means is that we also have the ability to coax those folks to stay in North Carolina and become solid Democratic voters for not just the 4 years that they're in college, but the 8 to 20 years that they stay in the state afterwards, or hopefully for the rest of their lifetimes. And what I will also say is, just to put this up here, Democrats have been losing rural America. It's no secret to anybody how we've not been engaging in these communities. And to me, one of the biggest ways that we can put a priority on them again is investing in a state that, again, besides Texas, has the 2nd highest rural population. And a lot of that is, again, because of that economic diversity that you're going to see across our state.
North Carolina is nearly perfectly balanced between urban, rural, and suburban populations. As Chair Clayton said, 2nd largest. For our suburban communities, despite a tough 2024 cycle, Democrats continue to make gains in suburban counties that will be critical to 2028 and beyond. In 2024, counties like Alamance, Johnston, Cabarrus, and Henderson all moved left from 2020. Our urban areas, as you can see, are also spread out, meaning that candidates would need to travel the state to reach voters. You can't just set up shop in one large city and win. So candidates are going to need to navigate a state that looks very different depending on where they are and who they're talking to. Candidates will have the opportunity to test and tailor their messages and tactics accordingly and export that across the country. So not only does North Carolina represent the current American electorate, it represents the future American electorate. By the next census, 4 out of every 10 Americans is going to live in the South. North Carolina is currently the 9th most populous state with a population of 11 million people, 7.5 million currently being registered and eligible voters. North Carolina's population is also dense despite having large rural communities, coming in at the 28th largest state. So North Carolina captures several major national trends: rapid population growth, suburban expansion, migration from other states, growing diversity, advanced manufacturing growth, technology and biotech expansion, and thanks to strong leaders like Governor Roy Cooper and Governor Josh Stein, our state has been named the #1 state for business years running. Not only that, we've been named the best state for workforce development, the best state to start a business, and the 3rd best state for Black-owned businesses. We're only going to keep growing, keep creating jobs, and as a result, continue becoming more and more electorally important, as shown by the future of the United States congressional map. Making projections based on current population growth trends, states in the traditional blue wall are poised to lose congressional seats, while North Carolina and other southern states are poised to gain them. That means if Democrats are going to pick up seats in Congress and build an enduring Democratic majority, we're going to have to learn how to be competitive in the South. Building power here is going to affect the national balance of power as we enter a new decade. And future candidates can do it in North Carolina in a way that won't drain their coffers.
So I know one thing that the committee is looking at is fairness, and North Carolina is a state that welcomes competition. It's a state that will allow all campaigns to have a real chance to compete. So for this, our lack of a dominant media market means that smaller resource or fewer resourced campaigns will have a real shot to get on TV and reach a critical mass of voters. So what we looked at here is we looked at presidential primary turnout in the last 2 presidential primary elections across a few southern states, and then we looked at the TV markets needed to reach a critical mass in those states. So in North Carolina, we're seeing 74% of the voters were in 3 of our dominant media markets. And then we compared the cost per 1,000 points or cost per 1,000 GRPs in order to reach the voters in those markets, because that's the commonly minimum accepted standard in order to burn in a message. And what we found is that North Carolina is an incredibly effective state to communicate in on TV, and most campaigns that are able to raise a good enough amount of money will be able to have a chance to get their message out and see if that resonates with an electorate that is truly representational of what campaigns will need to reach in order to win. But it's not just media markets. We're a state that is easy to traverse. We have cities all over. We have regional festivals all over. We have massive events like the State Fair, which bring in nearly 1 million people every year. The Azalea Festival in Wilmington brings in 250,000. There are built-in opportunities for campaigns that are ready to compete and reach voters all across the state. So what we're looking at here is North Carolina is always close. For the last 2 decades, every race has been within the margin of error. Looking at 2024, where we did still see 6 Democrats win statewide in North Carolina, the presidential margin it was close, but obviously Vice President Harris did not win. But what we saw is that North Carolina had the 2nd smallest shift away from Democrats from 2020 to 2024 of all the swing states, and the smallest shift in the South. So we are a state that we can win, and we're a state that we need to win going forward.
So I know that a lot of states are going to make the case to you all about how diverse they are, about how they can make sure that they are the battleground that can test the next presidential candidate. But what I really want to tell you all is that North Carolina is an effective place to spend money early. And the reason why that is because in 2028, North Carolina will be a rare state in the country that has 22 statewide races. We will have the most statewide races of any state in the country. And what that means is that 3 of those statewide races will be statewide Supreme Court justice races that will control the fate of the North Carolina State Supreme Court. In 2022, when North Carolina Democrats controlled the state Supreme Court, they said that partisan and racial gerrymandering was illegal in North Carolina. It brought a 7-7 Democrat to Republican congressional split from our state. In 2023, Republicans took back control of that North Carolina State Supreme Court, and they repealed the previous court's decision, ignoring stare decisis for the first time in court's precedent or court history. And what that meant was it took that 7-7 congressional split to a 10-4 minority. When I tell you all that focusing on North Carolina for one of the early states is not just talking and focusing on the presidential race, but also investing early resources so that down ballot elections in our state can get the resources that they need to make it over the line in a year where North Carolina will have so many statewide races on the ballot, the bang for your buck could not be better. And part of that is because North Carolina will be the only state in the country where Democrats will have the ability in the South to go on the offense against redistricting before 2030 cycle actually happens. So if we take back our court in 2028, we are able to reverse partisan and racial gerrymandering in 2029. We can come back in and do exactly what Republicans did to Democrats in 2023 in North Carolina. And we can retake that court and honestly give back 4 more House of Representatives seats to the Democratic Party automatically in that 2030 election time, even before reapportionment and redistricting happens after the census and after that 2030 cycle. We are looking at the future of the Democratic Party and where we have to make gains as an organization and look to the South as that. So not only will you have another red to blue U.S. Senate flip in North Carolina in 2028, you will also have a governor's race on the ballot, 9 other Council of State races on the ballot, 3 state Supreme Court races, and 5 Court of Appeals races too. All of those levers of power that dictate other levers of power, both in our state but also in our nation. And I need every single person on this committee to understand the power that you all have in choosing that trajectory and charting that course for our party here today. Next slide. North Carolina has been a beacon, I think, of what a state party can be. We have 25 full-time staffers right now in North Carolina that have been on the ground with us since 2023, September of that year. And part of that was because we wanted to see a year-round organizing program, year-round voter protection, year-round digital apparatus, and making sure that any candidate can get the resources that they need to do what they need to do across the state. We wanted to be a state party that gave to candidates versus taking from them, which is why we have democratized data in North Carolina. We are the only state in the country that I was aware of until Georgia said it yesterday, I ain't gonna lie to y'all, that gives out free data vote builder to all of our candidates up and down the ballot. Statewide Democrats that are running for office, we do not charge them for it whatsoever. Mobilized dashboards free of charge for our county party committees because county parties are the backbone of our Democratic Party. When our coordinated campaign director came into North Carolina this year, she came from Virginia. Shout out Abigail Spanberger in this house. But when she came in, she said, Anderson, I know offense to Virginia here either, but she said, I ain't never seen a state that's got organizers and fellows and field folks on the ground that know how to work vote builder like y'all do. And that is because we have a year-round training department in North Carolina that has carried our party in making sure that we are being actively engaging and making sure that we're in communities year-round every year. So robust training, large year-round staff, and definitively candidate promotion because we want to make sure that we are electing down-ballot Democrats and not only focused on top of ticket, though we know top of ticket is extremely important to everything we need to do. Next slide. So, to wrap it up for you all, North Carolina to me is a state right now that has the diversity that speaks for the future of America and what America currently looks like right now. If you can win races in North Carolina, presidents that are battleground and battle-tested here can win in other states across the country that we have not consistently won in as Democrats, but we used to, and we need to win back. And the other aspect is the electoral opportunities that we have down ballot in a state like North Carolina in 2028 is why we felt that that for the first time, North Carolina had to see if we could become part of the early state window, because we know that the investments that are made in that election cycle will transform down ballot races in our state. And we believe that we need to be a party that focuses on everything from school board to Senate to the White House, everybody. So thank y'all so much for the time. I deeply appreciate it, and we're excited for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So members, the floor is open for discussion. Please make sure you state your name, state, and raise your table tent. So Yvette.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. As a North Carolinian, I certainly appreciate everything that you said, especially with my family down there. So I want to be sure that we get this right. You talked about your college campuses. You have a large selection of HBCUs in the state of North Carolina. My parents graduated from Johnson C. Smith, and my brother and sister graduated from North Carolina A&T.
I knew you were about to say Aggie Pride somewhere in there.
There you go, Aggie Pride. But that being said, with voting sites being taken off of campuses, our students being disenfranchised, I haven't heard you say anything about that specific demographic. I know you mentioned the college students, the number of college students that you have, but what would be your focus on making sure that those students, that community, has equal access if we decide to make you, especially in light of the fact that they're trying to take these voting sites off of HBCU campuses?
Yes, ma'am. Part of what you all have to understand about North Carolina is that we are still considered, right, a red state in so many categories. And so that means our Republican state legislature has deemed for our Board of Elections to go in and try to disenfranchise college students across our campuses in North Carolina, which has meant that they have tried to take away voting sites off of those campuses. What we have done as a voter protection effort in the state, though, is made sure that we were educating students about those voting sites being taken off campus and actually busing them and helping them get to Board of Elections meetings in their counties, because the most important advocacy level that we can have is at that county level. And what we were able to do was come back in and actually sue with the help of the DSCC this year to keep those voting sites on campus. And while we were not successful for the primary, we fully expect ourselves to actually have those voting sites back on campus in the general election. And that is a lot harder, I think, for us to do when you're talking about how do you proactively, right, protect those voters on campus. But what that did to students is it gave the Democratic Party an organizing opportunity, because even though that voting site had been on A&T's campus for the last 2 election cycles, they had seen lower voter turnout than countywide averages in that county at the moment in time. And what we're looking to is actually trying to increase that turnout. And young people, right, the number one thing that we were able to go on A&T's campus this year and say is that Republicans are trying to take away your right to vote on this campus. And we even had a march of about 150 students that got out there and marched from the polling site, from their former polling site to their new polling site, which is about a 40-minute walk. And it made local news, it got publicity, people were on social media about it. And so everywhere across the country picked up, right, the fact that this was happening. We actually got to have Vice President Harris come back and do a surrogacy visit for us on A&T's campus. And there was about 350 students that came and were able to see her and her talking about the fact that this voting site was taken away and what it meant for folks. And I tell you all that because I know that it's the crux is that we've actually got to be able to figure out the organizing piece of buses to the polls, and that was something else we did for students during the primaries. But just in general, the actual active of taking away that voting site actually gave us something to go and message on that campus that actually encouraged more students to turn out during the primary election this year than they did in 2024. We had more students turn out in primary elections in 2026 than we did in 2024 on college campuses, even though their polling sites were not on their campuses anymore.
Thank you. Frank?
Frank Leon, D.C. Thank you for an excellent presentation. One of the criteria for choosing an early state is efficiency, which includes the practical ability to schedule the primary. When, as I understand it, North Carolina has a Republican state legislature, that legislature would need to approve legislation to move up the primary date. Do you have any reason to think that the Republican legislature will cooperate and do that?
I do. My first step, though, is I've got to get this DNC waiver, because if they passed a law tomorrow and I did not get the waiver from the DNC to move up in the calendar window, it would be a null and void point there. We have had really good conversations with our Republicans in the state legislature, and I believe that they are interested in this conversation if we are to receive this waiver from the DNC. And we do have legislative support from our Democratic leadership in our legislature, and also our Democratic governor would sign that bill into law tomorrow if he was able to. Yes, sir.
Jane?
Thank you, Chair, for your energy and your amazing executive director, who's a big leader in the association. First, a couple of things. One, I'm so proud of the leadership that you've done in the state, reaching out to rural folks and young people, and that resonates nationally as well. And so I've asked other states how they would use the primary if they were one of the first in the nation to grow their infrastructure. You definitely hit on, you have a lot of statewide races that would obviously piggyback on that, but talk to us a little bit more about how it would grow your infrastructure of your state party, and then talk to us a little bit more about your voter registration process. How does that work?
So that is actually where I believe early investment window could come in for North Carolina to have. It's no surprise to anybody in this room that typically voter protection or voter registration efforts happen on the 501c3 or the 501c4 side in states, typically because that is an easier place for nonpartisan voter registration to happen, and also a lot more funding goes into those apparatuses to be able to do that type of work. North Carolina, one of the reasons why you've seen, I think, across the country, Democratic voter registration decline is just the fact that we are actively out there as a party not doing it. And one of the things that we need to be able to do in a state like North Carolina, where you have 600,000 potential eligible black voters that are not currently registered in the state right now, an apparatus that is a state party that's able to go in with resources that are provided with that early state window investment to go in and chase those voters. We have a year-round organizing team. That year-round organizing team is in charge of building up county parties, recruiting people from across the state to run for office, and helping train them on how to do it. Because every single one of the organizers that I have right now are from the communities that they're in. They have either been campaign managers, field organizers themselves, county party chairs themselves, and they are a strong, scrappy team. I would love a cohort of that to be able to do voter registration on the hard side in North Carolina, and I believe that that is part of what we could do if we had funding in this early state window, because a lot of what halts voter protection efforts in states, especially in the South, is the lack of resources and investment that we can put into it, and also in states across this country. I know I have a lot of state party chairs in here that would probably agree with me that if you had a little bit more bang for your buck, you could also run a voter protection program and a voter registration program in the ways in which you need to, but oftentimes we're forced to choose, and most of the time you're going to choose voter protection over voter registration if you're a state party that's scrapped for resources, to be truthful with y'all.
Mm-hmm. Donna?
I was looking at Stephanie. I wanted to know what the rent was. I was going to see if she was going to say Charlotte or
Donna, questions, please.
Raleigh. I know, Mignon, you told me I have to go straight to the question. I wasn't ready. Okay, here I am now. Madam Chair, as you well know, North Carolina has been one of the states that's been traditionally covered under the Voting Rights Act. Two concerns. One, the black belt. I wasn't born, but my grandfather was born in Tarboro. If I pronounced it, mispronounced it, it's because I haven't.
Edgecombe County?
Yes, very much so. I got roots there. They got good food, too. But my concern is the dilution of the black vote in the state of North Carolina. That's number one. Number two, the status of various lawsuits filed by the North Carolina chapter NAACP, Common Cause, and groups of voters. I know the Fourth Circuit has traditionally not been kind to you and kind to the people of North Carolina, but where does that leave us now? There's an effort to purge non-citizens, especially those who participate in jury duty but not on voter registration lists. I got a lot of concerns about the state itself and what has happened over the last few years in terms of diluting not just the black vote, but Democrats across the state. I mean, the Republicans have, what, 11-3 advantage? And
Well, it's 10-4 right now. They're trying to take us to
10-4.
11-3.
That's right. And so
They
what
ain't gonna
is...
get there, though.
Yeah. And overall, you mentioned just now, and again, I was listening, but you mentioned that if you had resources, you would put in voter protection, but not, enlarging a franchise. Given the fact that the Republicans will make attempts to purge many of your eligible citizens. What is your strategy moving forward?
So we put more money into voter protection, actually, than we do voter registration. What I was alluding to there is I'm like, if we had the resources, we would also do voter registration. But to your point, Chairwoman, the voter protection side in North Carolina is the most important. It's why we are one of the few states in the country that have a year-round voter protection director. Her name is Kat Lawson. She's a former Duke University professor and someone that has been in civil rights litigation for most of her life because of the fact that we understand North Carolina is a state where you have to defend the vote. And we did that in 2024. North Carolina was the last state that had a statewide uncertified race. Allison Riggs won by 734 votes out of 5.5 million cast in North Carolina in 2024 to win a statewide Supreme Court race. And Republicans took us through a 6-month election denialism afterwards where we had to fight it off in both state and federal court to be able to make sure that we won that lawsuit. We did win that lawsuit, though. And I think the important part of that is to note that while Democrats or Republicans, right, were trying to build the playbook for how to steal elections in the state, North Carolina Democrats built the playbook for how to defend against it, and we will do that again. The difference, though, is that that was a statewide election. We're talking about federal races here, and we're also talking about primaries. And so we see less shenanigans in primaries than we do in general elections in North Carolina, just by the default of that Republicans are trying to steal elections in the general election rather than stealing them in a primary election against Democrats in that sense. But one of the things that you mentioned and how we're focusing on voter enfranchisement and just making sure that black belt region of the state is secured, we are seeing gerrymandering has impacted North Carolina far beyond how it has impacted the rest of the country. Like, North Carolina is the state, it's the most gerrymandered state in the country. I would fight anybody on that, including Texas and Louisiana and everywhere else right now, to be truthful with y'all. I would, come on. But I think it is important for people to understand that disenfranchisement of redistricting and gerrymandering in North Carolina has also impacted the way that black voters feel representation in the state. And what better way, to be honest with y'all, to put emphasis on voters who have felt like their votes don't matter than to say the National Democratic Party is coming in to reinvest, reinvigorate, and that's exactly what happened. And I give y'all the best example of it. The Lumbee community in southeastern North Carolina in Robeson County used to be a Democratic majority for a Native American population in the South that voted Democratic historically. They came in, Republicans, the RNC put a community center in Robeson County. The National Republican Party did this, right? In 2016, they saw the future of where they could gain seats in a place like North Carolina, and they did that. And right now, Robeson County has flipped from being a Democratic stronghold to a Republican stronghold because that National Party came in and put that emphasis there. The same thing can be said for black voters in rural parts of eastern North Carolina right now who need to see a national party that says your voices still matter. Your state may have disregarded them, disenfranchised them, and said that your votes don't count, but we as a national party believe that they do, and we're coming to chase them every step of the way by showing up in places that Republicans do not believe that we want to or that we belong in right now, and we have an opportunity there. And we are planning Don Davis's seat. They are trying to take us right now. We've got a 10-4 minority in Congress, like I mentioned. They are trying to take us to that 11-3 minority by taking out Don Davis's seat. And unfortunately, because of the Louisiana versus Calais decision, a lawsuit that we had filed in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, right, cannot actually go through. It's got no more jurisdiction to it because of Section 2 being eradicated from the VRA. It is why I go back to the point that I made about our Supreme Court races in North Carolina, though, and the importance of those statewide races and getting those resources to them, because North Carolina is the only state in the South that can reverse partisan and racial gerrymandering, can give back black representation. We lost in 2022 cycle alone. Democrats in North Carolina lost 5 Democratic House seats, state House seats from eastern North Carolina. And that was particular because Republicans had come in the year before and re-gerrymandered the state again. So to me, a lot of what I'm talking about is giving back that representation in the form of what do we prioritize electorally in our states. And if you prioritize North Carolina this year, you are or in 2028 in that sense, you are prioritizing to me the Black Belt region, black voters that have been forgotten about and have been disregarded and that have not had the national investment that we've needed for a long time into that region.
Ma'am, I love your response, and I just would hope in the future that, G.K. Butterfield and many others who are very familiar with all of our work here, please make sure that they're involved in some of the conversations that you're having in the state. Knowing that they are involved will be most helpful to many of us. We've worked with them for 20, 30 years, and I cut my teeth in North Carolina like I did in many other southern states on the Jackson campaign in '84. So thank you, but we need to make sure that we're including those voices that are now being silenced.
Well, and I was going to say, Congressman Butterfield sits on my finance committee for the state party, so he has been a very active hand in making sure that the year-round organizing program that we have, and also he approves my salary every year too, to be honest with y'all. And so Congressman is very involved with our finances, but to your point, we can definitely be more inclusive of this process going forward, and we want to make sure that if we're able to get this waiver, that folks across North Carolina are really, really excited about it. So thank you, Chairwoman.
Roxanne?
Thank you. Hi, Roxanne Brown, Pennsylvania. Really, really well done presentation, Anderson and team. So of the states, the southern states under consideration, North Carolina has the highest union density at 5%, but I didn't see you make reference to labor or unions in your presentation. So I'm just curious what that engagement would look like.
Can I be honest? I watched some of the things yesterday, and I knew that I might get some questions about it. So we tried to save most of our presentation for what we thought we were not going to get questions about. But to that point, with North Carolina, we are ranked #1 for business. We are ranked number 50th in workers' rights in the state or in the country. And that is not shy of that. We've got the least union representation. And part of the reason why I think that North Carolina should be part of the early state window is because my unions in North Carolina right now need the support from national unions to do the work that they need to do. Right now, North Carolina has a constitutional amendment that is being put on our ballot in 2026 for right-to-work laws enshrined in our state constitution. And at this moment in time, our unions, labor unions, came to the party and said, how do we get help to be able to organize around this? That should not be the case. I got to be honest with y'all. Our labor unions should have the power on the ground to be able to organize for themselves. And we need national labor unions to understand that if you're the least unionized state, that should be the first place where you're putting all of your investment into, because we need to come back from that. And we need the resources to be able to do it and to help educate a population across the South that has historically had a bad taste in their mouths when the word union comes around, because we have had a very good propaganda machine from the right that has come into the South and made it so that the South does not necessarily take kindly, right, quote unquote, to unions when you're talking about it in a political stance. And we need to make sure that we've got a national party that's coming in and national candidates that are going all throughout our state talking about being pro-union, pro-labor, pro-worker, and helping educate even Democrats about why that is an important stance for us to take. And the ability for our labor unions to have that power and to not rely on the party, to be honest with y'all, is the dream that I have, because that way they can hold the party accountable too, and we need to be. So be truthful. Yes, ma'am.
Steph?
Thank you so much for your presentation. Stephanie Campagna-Wheaton from New Jersey. It was actually brought to my attention yesterday that a more experienced member of this committee was not sure why I was asking the same question to every state. And the reason I have done so is because, as I'm sure everyone here knows, there is a housing crisis in this country that disproportionately affects young people and seniors. And I am asking this to get a sense of how much rent costs in these states, because if we were to select these folks to have to be first in the nation or in the early primary window, we should know that the people who move to work on campaigns will not go into debt to serve their party and our democracy in this way. So that is why I'm asking it. I actually have 2 questions today. Donna, you'll be pleased to know I actually have questions about 3 cities in North Carolina, so I want to see if you guys did your homework. Can you tell me the average rent for a 1-bedroom in Charlotte, Raleigh, and Greensboro?
Raleigh, I know, is $1,400 around, and I also added rural North Carolina into that mix.
Please do.
Just because we do plan to have organizers all over the state, not just in our major metropolitan areas in that capacity. I pay $1,100 right now for the rent that I have in Person County, which is rural North Carolina. It's about an hour and 15 minutes away from Raleigh in that sense. But Keon, do you have the numbers from Charlotte and Greensboro?
The average rent in Charlotte is around $1,450 a month. Greensboro is $1,150 a month, but organizers will probably be all over, so you should also look around Greenville. Greensboro, I should say, is $1,150 a month. Greenville is about $900 a month, and if you're going to look down south by the water in Wilmington, it's $1,400 a month too.
Thank you. My second question.
The other thing, just to add on to
yes,
that,
please do.
two steps, sorry. One thing that we have also done this year is tried to help supporter housing. I know that that is still a thing of the past for some of the organizers in here who may have worked on campaigns, but a lot of our organizers still ask for it if they can get it, and that means they're able to save some of that money. And so we've got a very robust network of supporter housing in North Carolina that's also able to help come in and hopefully, as your volunteer network brings up from the presidential campaigns, as you gain your volunteer network, there will also be a lot of people who have hosted folks before in their houses, and they're going to offer that to you as a way to help subsidize some of that campaign cost as well. It won't be for everybody. I know some people are like, I don't want to live with somebody else, to be honest with you, but it was the best thing that I ever did in Iowa, to be honest. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My second question is, can you speak on any restrictions to abortion in your state?
Yes, North Carolina does have a 12-week abortion ban right now, a 10-week medical abortion ban in the state, and that is thanks to our Republican state legislature. But we are the only state in the South that still has access to abortion like that. And so if you all are looking to other southern states, they're going to be looking to North Carolina first as to where they come if that was something that, that they needed, to be honest with you, for medical care.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Indira?
Thank you, Chair, for the excellent presentation. I know North Carolina has a very vibrant interfaith coalitions, and you guys have great conversations, and we've invited several guests from your state to the DNC Interfaith Council meetings. So can you answer about how your state party is working on, works with building those coalitions, and how can a potential presidential candidate work in that space, and what can they learn and apply to the rest of their campaign?
I think North Carolina still has a very high faith population within it, and it's something that, especially when you look at our rural black communities in North Carolina, the church is still one of the foundational elements of civic engagement that we have across our rural areas. And so definitely our Interfaith Caucus, we also have several other caucuses in the state party, so about 22 statewide caucuses that we have that represent different identity groups and also different, to your point, faith demographics as well. And I think it's just a way that you've got organizing arms that are already built out and ready to go in the state for presidential candidates and also campaigns to tap into who are geared up and who also have connections across every demographic, because that's sort of the work that we've been doing to try to build out faith networks across North Carolina. Our state Supreme Court Justice candidate, Anita Earls, this year has made that one of her pillars, and so faith has been a huge component of what she's been going around and organizing on. Her coalitions and community engagement director, it's one of his key platforms and key pillars. So it's really bringing together communities that can cross-pollinate is sort of how I'm saying it, because I think that definitely when we have different faiths that come together, it makes us stronger as a state, but also we have definitely had internal demographics in North Carolina that I think have also had some of those problems, but it's also made us be able to come back together stronger when you have different faith communities that can also be put together at a table and say, we may have disagreements in some ways, but we also have a common goal here that we want to see North Carolina become better. And what does that look like, and how do we envision that together? So it's a lot of meetings, to be truthful with y'all, going around the state and sitting in circles with folks, to be honest, little talking circles. And we do pass around a talking stick sometimes, to be truthful. But it's nice, and I also think that it's a huge part of, if a presidential candidate's to engage in North Carolina, having a sort of a faith engagement director would be a huge part of what they need to do.
Thank you. Yvette?
One quick question. You talked about having resources so that you could have a robust voter protection and voter registration program. What would that look like? What does that mean? What would it include if you did have the resources, and how would it differ from your voter protection program now? I know you said you don't have the resources for voter registration, so it's a two-part question.
No.
What would it look like if you had the resources for both, and what are you currently doing?
Doubling my team of organizers. That is the first thing for voter registration efforts, is ensuring that we have a sort of subsection. So right now, one of our pieces of our year-round organizing team focuses on year-round voter engagement. So that's building up the county parties, that's recruitment, it's knocking doors. I would love a subsection of that to just focus on voter registration drives and how are they helping our county parties set them up in each one of their communities, and going out and sometimes volunteers just don't think about it, right? Your local high school football game on a Friday night in a local rural county is the best place for you to be with a clipboard out there asking people if they're registered to vote. Sometimes though, it's the the hardest thing for a person in that county to get up there and do because they know everybody. That is the direct opposite problem that I have in my urban communities, where you could sit outside of a grocery store all day, never talk to anybody that you've met in your life, but that is still a great place to be out there with a clipboard registering people to vote. And so it's the organizing piece of that, of getting folks to think about how do we do that in each one of our communities and where are the places. And to be honest with y'all, it takes personnel and people to make that happen, which is why voter protection and voter registration efforts are so expensive. The voter protection effort, though, honestly, I just want to give Kat Lawson more help. She is a phenomenal strategist. She's our voter protection director right now, but it would mean having deputies across the state in different geographical regions, because what we're really trying to do is make sure that across all 100 counties in North Carolina, we have liaisons going to every single Board of Elections meeting and actually taking notes, transcribing, if they're able to, the what the meeting is, what's actually being said in the meeting, because we are going back and filing individual county lawsuits in places that we need to be able to protect voting sites. And also, the Board of Elections folks are also citizens of each county that they're in, right? And so, a little bit of in-person negotiation with folks also happens. So finding them at their church, finding them in the grocery store, putting the public pressure on them like we need to, because to your point, Board of Elections, just so everybody understands, because I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, Board of Elections in North Carolina control where polling locations and where polling sites are allocated out to and how long they're open. There's a state Board of Elections and there's 100 county boards of elections too, and each one of those county boards have meetings each month that they debate voting plans and things like that at. And so our voter protection team, making sure that we have folks that are advocating at those Board of Elections meetings, they're kind of becoming sort of like your county commissioner meeting or your city council meeting. We're also asking people to go to Board of Elections meetings right now too, and so helping more organizing power to get more people to those meetings would be really, really helpful for our voter protection efforts.
Thank you. Jamie?
Thank you. Jamie Salzer, North Dakota. Thank you, Chairwoman. I want to follow up on Frank, and actually Donna touched on this a bit as well, regarding the needing to go to the Republicans to get their sign-on to go early. If there's one thing I know about North Carolina, this is a little bit of a challenge, be more specific maybe. North Carolina Republicans have seemed to want to punish Democrats every chance they get over the last 10 years, take as much power away as possible. We're going to need them to agree to go first. Your answer is to give us a waiver and then we'll work on it. And in the application, you said you received positive indications from them. Can you maybe be specific about what those are that make you believe it will not be a waste of time for us to go through the work and then have you come back and say, sorry, we can't go first?
When we brought this up to the Republicans in North Carolina, the number one answer that we got back from them was that they just had not considered this before, and they haven't had to, right? Republicans have controlled North Carolina for a long time, and part of what that has led to, right, is the fact that North Carolina has become a state where Republicans cannot lose it if they are in order to win the White House. And so in 2026 or 2024, when North Carolina became one of the second states in the country to swing the least to the right behind Wisconsin, North Carolina Republicans, to me, got a little nervous in their butts, and I'm thinking that in this election cycle, what they're also looking at is the amount of resources and money that would also be coming in to the Republican side of things if they were to be able to do this. It's not, the argument that I'm making to them is like, it's not just a benefit to Democrats, it's a benefit to Republicans too. And also, just to be honest with y'all, New Hampshire got $90 million of economic revenue pushed into their state in 2020 after being one of the first in the nation states. And the reason why I tell you all that is because Western North Carolina, that is a region of Appalachia that got hit hardest by the worst natural disaster that we've ever had in state history, Hurricane Helene, that took a region of North Carolina that had 25 feet of water that swept through that that region of the country. The economic opportunities that we could bring by having presidential campaigns come back to that region of North Carolina alone that is fully represented by Republicans right now, that money and that bang for your buck that you can get is also something that they are interested in chasing. The hospitality industry out there is too. I've talked with a lot of Republican hotel owners over the last 3 months, to be honest with y'all, about the number two drivers, economic drivers that presidential campaigns bring into a state, hospitality and tourism. And so Western North Carolina could use a lot from that, and so could the eastern part of our state too. And so I'm trying to make the best economic case that I can to them, but also, again, without this waiver, I can't necessarily say that the DNC is fully behind me when I do this yet. And so it's sort of like a chicken and an egg situation. situation that I'm finding myself in North Carolina right now. But I know that if I could go back and say, no, the DNC is fully behind this, and also for my legislative leadership to be able to make that case. The other thing that I will say to y'all, Republicans had about 20 members that had turnover in this general election cycle, so they got primaried. My Speaker of the North Carolina State Senate, Phil Berger, that had been there as long as I've been alive, got ousted in a primary this year. And so we're going to have a different General Assembly coming back in January of 2027, which is really when we would like to push that state piece of legislation into action if you all, after September, are allowing for us to get that waiver. That's at least the time frame that I have been told right now. If that is different, I'm sure this body will correct me on that in every way, shape, and form. But
We have about 5 minutes left for North Carolina's presentation, so we have David, Maria, Wendy, Keith, and Melissa in the queue, so we're probably going to have to make our questions shorter and our answers shorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Sorry.
David?
Thank you. David McDonald, Washington. You commented on how cheap television advertising was in the state. You have also indicated that the state's got an extremely large rural population. And I guess I'm curious about how accessible internet campaigning is, what kind of indigenous local content and local influencers you have that might make an additional an additional access point for startup campaigns, particularly if the internet access has been disrupted by the storm damage that you indicated. Thanks.
No, and I think that one thing that you have to note is, like, if you're going to campaign anywhere in rural anywhere, it's going to be showing up in person. And I think that's why we make the case so much about the type of rural demographics that we have, because it's heavily dense rural populations, but still the second highest rural in the state or in the country. Because I think that that is what candidates are going to have to be forced to do, is actually do a little bit of that retail politics, and hopefully a lot of retail politics, because I think that's what makes the best presidential test case, is whether or not you can actually go out and have your campaigns in person go out and talk to these voters. But I do think there's a rapidly developing influencer network in North Carolina too, something that we've seen across the state, both from our rural parts and our urban communities as well, that would be able to help candidates reach. But I do really think that you don't necessarily have to go into the media markets in North Carolina to be able, I think, to build an effective presidential campaign. I think you can use social media, because even in rural places where you don't have good internet access, at least there are, I would say, majority of people do have phone service in those places, cell phone service in them or whatnot, and there are ways to reach people online. I don't want to negate the fact that I'm a rural broadband expert too in that sense, so I'm like, there is definitely a broadband problem, do not get me wrong, but those voters are still online, whether or not that's when they're in their communities or in their town and they're actually getting online and access that way, or whether it's when they're going to school. At some form or time, people are getting on the internet. It just depends on whether or not they have that consistently at their homes, and I think that's why, Dawson, to be honest with you, we talk about TV. I know a lot of people in the Democratic Party want to move away from it in so many cases, but to be honest, like, rural voters, that is still the number one effective way, besides rural radio, and again, showing up at their door, that you're going to be able to talk to these folks, besides mail programs still. And that's just a reality of the situation that we find ourselves in with the type of voters that we have in rural places, which oftentimes tend to be older voters.
Maria?
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you for doing this. Maria Cardona with DC. My question to you is, understanding that North Carolina has been one of the biggest states of the growing Hispanic population literally in the last decades, right? Now they are maturing and evolving, and they're becoming voters, which is exactly what we want. That also makes you a target, especially in this environment, for Republicans and the Trump White House, who have said very clearly they intend on sending ICE to these communities, to voting places, even though that's highly illegal. Our community doesn't understand that it's highly illegal, and they're scared. And in fact, even just their mentioning that they're going to send ICE has been enough for Latino voters to say, you know what, it's not worth me showing up to vote if they're going to either deport me or my family. And so I would love to hear a little bit about what you guys are doing to work with the Hispanic communities on the ground to inform them that this, in fact, is illegal, and whether it's resources that you need or working with the National Party or working with local law enforcement to make sure that people understand that they will be protected and, in fact, that their vote will be counted.
Yeah. So North Carolina, when Gregory Bovino, who is actually a North Carolinian himself, was in charge of DHS still and Homeland Security, what we found was that when he came into North Carolina, they implemented what they called Charlotte's Web, which was sort of the ICE raid for Mecklenburg County, one of our second largest counties in North Carolina for Democratic population, but also just population in general. And what we did was we listened and we learned from partner organizations across other states that had already been through ICE raids. And that's not to say that it was a fair thing for them to have already gone through it, but honestly, North Carolina took the lessons and we learned from it. So Siembra, North Carolina, Carolina Migrant Network, and El Pueblo are three of the organizations on the ground that stepped up statewide during that time frame. They are always a good organization for you to give money to be honest with y'all, if you were ever looking at organizations that to me are on the front lines of that defense. And those are organizations that we're partnered with right now to ensure sort of the ICE Watch trainings that happen. We're looking at that for polling locations. It is not an if, it is a when in North Carolina that we are going to see masked Border Patrol agents showing up at polling locations during this election cycle. And so the plan has got to be, in most of our major counties, so there is not to say there's not been ICE raids in rural North Carolina. There definitely have been. It has been more of traffic stops, though, than it has been showing up at actual individual locations like a Walmart, a grocery store, or a actual job site or whatnot, right? In our urban communities where you have a majority of those Democratic populations in, they have been showing up at those job sites. And so most of our urban communities will always have 2 to 3 to 4 early voting polling locations. So our encouragement to our Hispanic communities is to go vote early and also watch Siembra, North Carolina's website for where ICE Watch is happening, and we will have someone stationed outside those polling locations alerting folks as to when, because if they're not here and they're here, or if they're not here and they're here, we're trying to tell people where should they go and vote and where is safe to. And I understand that that is a little bit more of a DEFCON 4 scenario in some ways that we are in, but it is the one that we're trying to plan and prep for and say, how do we be proactive about knowing that this is going to happen? In our more rural communities, though, to be honest with you, it does look like encouraging mail-in voting early and often. Right now, you can go on the Board of Elections website in North Carolina and submit and ask to go ahead and request your mail-in ballot ahead of time. It's not going to get to you right away, right? But there's a window of time where that mail-in ballot is sent out in North Carolina, and you have at least a 60 to almost 90-day window to send back in that ballot. And we are encouraging folks to go ahead and get that ballot back in early if you feel unsafe about going to a polling location. But it is a valid fear, and it is something that we're also still trying to learn from partners across the country to understand how can we be better prepared on the ground as a party to also to help with that, to be honest with you. But I do think it needs to come from community organizations that are already engaging in those communities already, because the party, to me, does not have the best foothold yet. We want to get there, though, and to me, this is how we can do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wendy?
Microphone. Microphone.
Can you hear me now? Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. You brought up the year when your election was delayed, being counted, being official. Do you have worries that that might happen in the 2028 presidential preference primary?
No.
That kind of mischief?
No. It's a primary, it's not a general election, to be honest with y'all. And then also that happened because in North Carolina, if you're within a 10,000 vote margin for a statewide victory, you can go through a recount territory. We've never had that for a federal election in North Carolina, to be within a 10,000 vote margin in the state.
Thank you. Keith?
We could anticipate, though, some of our state Supreme Court races in 2028 if I do not have this coming down to a 10,000 vote margin. And then we have the majorities of the House of Representatives left up to God himself, Okay. Add that on there.
Yes, Keith Umamoto from California. Thanks for your presentation, and thank you for identifying what the RNC has done in terms of the community center. Folks may know that the RNC had 24 of those throughout the country. We had one in Little Saigon in California, and we had Asian clubs emerge as a result of that to combat it. And I appreciate my sister there, Donna Brazil, in terms of mentioning Dr. Butterfield and working within the community, because I think that's so essential. In reference to these community centers, clearly it demonstrated it worked on the RNC side. With the North Carolina side, Democratic Party side, how do you see strategically how you can implement that kind of activity, as well as the nexus to why being an early state benefit towards that end?
Yeah, let me tell you how I could pay for it too. North Carolina Republicans opened up a campaign finance law in the state when they were trying to figure out how they were going to pay for their election denialism scam in 2024. And they made a law that said the building fund in North Carolina could help pay legal bills along with any other sort of fight that you have for that. But I would use a building fund, and they said that any unlimited amounts of money from corporate dollars can go into that building fund to be able to help pay for those legal bills as well. And so utilizing a building fund to help actually go out there and formulate, I joke with folks, I'm like, phase 3 of the Democratic Party in North Carolina is real estate. And it is finding where population trends in the state are going and actually putting physical building and locations there for a Democratic Party to actually have an operation in. Because to be honest with y'all, that physical space and that physical presence is still so important. It is why the RNC made that investment into community centers. It is why that showing up consistently made that difference for them. And so for me, it is utilizing ways in which that we could fund efforts a little bit differently that don't have to use direct hard side money that we are getting from presidential candidates to also be able to go in and expand those efforts on the ground.
Melissa?
Thank you for your presentation. And I think I'm going to piggyback from my colleague Maria Cardona's question because I do see that there is a huge need for any of our states that we're evaluating for primary states to really reach out to the Latino community in particular because your population is growing. I was doing a little research now about 11% of your population in North Carolina is Latino. It's not a monolithic population. About 184,000 voted in 2024. What is not just your voter protection plan, you've already covered that, but what is your intention to reach a very diverse population coming from very different countries, kind of newish to North Carolina in terms of growth? I would love to see, dedicated staff. I would like to hear, dedicate outreach plans. But can you talk a little bit more about that strategy? And if it's not incorporated, how would you start about doing that?
So right now, sitting in my bank account, I have about $25,000 of a gift that is hopefully going to go towards expanding out our coalitions department to hire a Hispanic organizer in the state right now. Because to me, to your point, we do have to put staff behind this. At the end of the day, nothing happens without the people and the resources behind them on the ground. The other side of that, though, to me, is a big part of candidate recruitment. Ricky Hurtado was the last state legislator out of North Carolina that lost his seat in the 2022 cycle. He was the only and the last Hispanic state legislator that we had in North Carolina. And when you think about a community right now that wants to see themselves represented in politics, the best thing that our party can do is take our training department and also take our organizing team and make sure that the recruitment process that we have for not just 2028, but for 2027 municipal elections start with the fact that we need more Hispanic representation at the local level so that they can come up in our political process too. But that is intentionality, and that is why I'm looking at that staffer there as well. Because to be honest with y'all, if you don't have somebody in that room that's consistently saying, well, what about us? Right? Sometimes that is oftentimes, and it's not a meaning of malice, right? But it is just like you have so many things as a party and an organization and so many different communities that you have to focus on and that you're looking to. Putting somebody who is physically there to remind folks of that is the most important thing that I can do in that training and also that recruitment process. And I tell you all that because North Carolina is the only state in the country that has a judicial department within it. And we made that effort because judicial races in North Carolina had been historically ignored. And so it was really important for us to invest in that program. And now Becca Zirkin, my judicial director, every program we do, she says, what about the judges? Where are they going in this? How are we thinking about them? And she's their advocate. We need to make sure that our organizations and that our communities in our party right now have an advocate in the party and on our party staff too.
Well, thank you so much, North Carolina. You have brought energy. I think everybody is awake now. You have been very, very thorough, and we thank you for your presentation. Thank you for coming.
Thank y'all so much for all that you do. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Binyan. I just want to say I'm glad that you threw a y'all every now and then into your presentation because you talk so fast, I thought you were from Massachusetts.
Yeah.